The Mafia boss took the Black Maid to a private hall to shield her, but her honesty exposed a family secret. Jasmine Carter had always been used to being invisible. As the Black Maid in the Castellano mansion, she was the quiet worker who stayed out of sight, moving through the halls with practiced silence. No one expected anything from her, not even a glance. She was just the help, the one who kept the place running. But today was different. Today, things were about to change. As she moved through the grand dining hall, the whispers started. Guests who had never given her a second thought were now talking about her in hushed voices, their eyes following her every move. Jasmine had seen the looks before, the subtle gestures that told her she wasn't wanted, that she was beneath them. But today, the words were louder, more cutting. One of the guests, a woman in a glittering gown, laughed mockingly as Jasmine passed by. A maid should know her place, the woman sneered, making sure everyone around her heard. Jasmine's stomach turned. The embarrassment was suffocating, but she knew better than to show it. She had learned long ago that showing any weakness meant more ridicule, more shame. So she kept her head down, focused on her task, and moved silently through the room. But then, everything shifted. From the corner of her eye, she saw him. Dominic Castellano, the Mafia boss, walked into the room. His presence immediately changed the atmosphere. He was a man of authority, his mere entrance enough to quiet the murmurs in the room. Jasmine's heart raced as she realized he was heading straight toward her. She stood still, frozen for a moment, unsure of what was happening. Dominic's eyes met hers. There was no anger, no mockery in his gaze. Instead, it was as though he could see right through her, understanding her discomfort, the humiliation she was feeling. Without a word, he gestured for her to follow him. Jasmine hesitated, her instincts telling her to stay in the background, to keep out of his way. But Dominic's gaze was unyielding, and with a deep breath, she followed him. They moved through the crowded hall, past the shocked faces of the guests, until they reached a private room. The door closed behind them, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Jasmine was alone with Dominic. He turned to face her, his expression calm, yet intense. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice surprisingly gentle. Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. No one had ever asked her that before, not like this. She could feel the weight of the words hanging in the air, and for a moment, she was too stunned to answer. But then, something unexpected happened. In that quiet, private space, Jasmine's words spilled out. "I'm just tired of being treated like I don't matter," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It was the truth, the raw truth that she had kept hidden for so long. Dominic's expression softened. He studied her for a moment, as if considering her words carefully. Then, in a move that surprised her, he nodded. "You matter," he said simply. It was those words that changed everything. In that moment, Jasmine realized that the man standing before her, the powerful Mafia boss, saw her as more than just the help. He saw her as a person. But it wasn't just that. As they spoke, Jasmine found herself telling him something she never thought she would. A secret about his family that she had accidentally uncovered. She didn't intend to say it, but once the words started, they couldn't stop. She had overheard something she shouldn't have, something that could change everything for the Castellano family. Dominic's eyes widened as he listened, his expression shifting from calm to shock. The secret she had revealed wasn't just a small detail. It was something that could bring the entire family down. Jasmine's honesty had exposed a truth that no one had been prepared for. And in that moment, everything in the room changed. Dominic wasn't just the Mafia boss anymore. He was someone who had just had his world turned upside down. The room fell silent after Jasmine's confession, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Dominic stood still for a moment, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her heart race. He had never expected this. He had come to this private hall to shield her from further humiliation, to offer her a place where she could regain some dignity. But now she had given him something far more significant. A family secret, one that could unravel everything he had worked for. Jasmine could feel the tension in the air, the realization of what she had just done settling heavily in her chest. She hadn't meant to speak it aloud, but once the words started, they poured out like water from a broken dam. She had overheard a conversation between Dominic's closest allies, a whisper about a betrayal that had been hidden for years, a betrayal that involved his own blood. The secret was far-reaching, and if the wrong people found out, it would not only destroy Dominic, but also his entire empire. She had never been part of his world, never meant to be entangled in the web of power and deceit that defined his life. But here she was, standing in the very heart of it, holding the key to its collapse. For a moment, Dominic said nothing. His eyes were still locked on hers, his expression unreadable. Jasmine's pulse quickened. She had spoken the truth, but the truth was dangerous. It was a truth that could ruin everything. "I didn't mean to tell you," she said quietly, her voice trembling. I just overheard something I shouldn't have. I never wanted to be part of your business." Dominic raised a hand, silencing her. His gaze softened slightly, though the intensity remained. "You did the right thing," he said, his voice surprisingly calm. Jasmine blinked, surprised by his response. The Mafia boss, the man who commanded respect with every step he took, was not angry. He was not threatening her. Instead, he was speaking to her as though her words had meaning, as though her honesty had value. "I know what you've uncovered," Dominic continued, his tone steady. "And I know it's not your fault. You're not involved in this, Jasmine. But you've just put us on a path that can't be undone. And I need you to understand that." Jasmine swallowed hard, her mind racing. I didn't mean to put you in danger," she whispered, her hands trembling slightly. "I just thought you should know. I never meant for things to go this far." Dominic's eyes softened, but there was a seriousness to his expression that she couldn't ignore. He took a step closer to her, his presence almost overwhelming in the small room. "You've done more than you realize," he said, his voice low and controlled. "You've saved me, Jasmine. And in doing so, you've given me a chance to fix something that's been festering for years." Jasmine looked up at him, her heart racing. She had no idea what he meant. How could her words have saved him? What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic's expression hardened for a moment, his gaze flickering with something that almost resembled pain. But it was quickly replaced by a steely determination. "The family secret you uncovered isn't just a betrayal. It's the reason everything's been falling apart. It's the reason I've been fighting this war for so long." He took another step forward, closing the distance between them. "But I don't intend to let it destroy me. Not now. Not when I have you." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected him to speak to her like this, to say those words. "Me?" she whispered, disbelief in her voice. Dominic nodded. "You're more than just a maid to me, Jasmine," he said, his voice low and steady. "You're a witness. A witness to something that could change everything. And now that you know the truth, you're not going anywhere. Not without me." Jasmine's head spun as she tried to process his words. She had never imagined she would be in this position, never imagined that her life would intertwine with his in this way. She was just a maid, just a worker in his mansion, someone who was supposed to stay out of the way. But now, Dominic was saying that she was part of something much bigger than she had ever realized. "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "What happens now?" Dominic's eyes gleamed with something unreadable. "Now we fight. We fight to protect what's mine. What's ours." Jasmine couldn't help but feel a shiver run down her spine. She had no idea what she was getting into, but she knew one thing for sure. Her life had just changed forever. And no matter how much she wanted to turn away, to run from the dangers that now loomed ahead, she couldn't. She was in this, whether she liked it or not. The door to the private hall opened then, and one of Dominic's bodyguards stepped inside, his face grim. Dominic turned to him, his expression hardening. "Get the others," he ordered. "It's time to take action." The bodyguard nodded and left, closing the door behind him. Dominic turned back to Jasmine, his gaze unwavering. "Stay with me, Jasmine. You've just become part of this family story. And now, we make sure the truth stays buried." Jasmine's heart pounded in her chest as she nodded, unsure of what the future held, but knowing that there was no turning back now. The tension in the room grew as Dominic Castellano turned back to Jasmine, his presence towering over her. His usual confidence was laced with something deeper, something that had only recently begun to show itself. A vulnerability she had never expected from a man like him. His dark eyes bore into hers, searching for answers, perhaps even for reassurance, as if her words had already altered something irrevocable. The air between them was thick with unspoken thoughts. Jasmine could feel her pulse racing, her mind still reeling from the weight of what had just transpired. The family secret she had unwittingly exposed was more than just an inconvenience. It was a ticking time bomb that could shatter everything. Dominic had said they would fight to protect what was his, but what did that mean for her? What did it mean for her future in his world? "You've been quiet," Dominic said, his voice softer than usual, as he stepped closer. Jasmine swallowed hard. She wasn't used to this side of him, the side that wasn't cold and calculating, but something more human. "I'm just trying to understand," she said quietly. "What happens now? What do we do next?" Dominic leaned back against the desk, his expression shifting into one of contemplation. "We keep this quiet. We keep you safe." The words hung in the air, as if they held more weight than they should. But Jasmine wasn't sure if he meant her safety in terms of his protection, or if he meant something else, something deeper. Her instincts screamed that she was in deeper than she realized. "Safe from what?" she asked, though she wasn't sure if she truly wanted the answer. Dominic's gaze hardened. "From everything," he said, his voice low. "From the people who would use this to bring us down. From the ones who wouldn't hesitate to take what they think is theirs. And from the consequences of what you've uncovered." Jasmine's mind raced. She had thought about it before, how her life might change if she ever became too involved with Dominic and his world. But she hadn't expected it to be like this. She hadn't expected to be standing in front of him, with the fate of an entire empire hanging in the balance, simply because of a secret she'd overheard. The weight of it pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. "But why me? Why now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. He was searching for something in her, she realized. But what? Was it trust? Or was it something else? Finally, he spoke. "Because you're the only one who knows. You're the only one who's seen the truth. And now you're part of this." He stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "You're not just a maid anymore, Jasmine. You never were. You're someone who matters. You're someone who can make a difference." Jasmine's breath caught in her throat. Those words, those simple, yet powerful words, were like a weight being lifted off her shoulders. They were a promise, a strange kind of reassurance. But they also felt like a burden, one that she wasn't sure she was ready to carry. "I never asked for this," she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. "I never wanted to be involved in your world." Dominic's expression softened, and for a brief moment, he seemed almost human. "I know," he said quietly. "I know you didn't. But now you are. And whether you like it or not, you're in this with me. There's no going back." The finality of his words echoed in the room, and Jasmine realized just how true they were. She was in this. There was no escaping it. Not now. Not when she knew what she knew. "What happens to me now?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Dominic took a step forward, his presence overwhelming her senses. "Now," he said, his voice soft but firm, "we protect you. We keep you out of harm's way. And we make sure no one else finds out what you know." His words were comforting, but they were also a reminder that her life had irrevocably changed. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She wasn't just someone who kept the mansion running in the background. She was part of a larger story now, a story that had the potential to change everything. Dominic studied her for a moment, then gestured toward the door. "Come with me," he said, his voice calm and commanding. "We have work to do." Jasmine hesitated, but only for a moment. As she followed him out of the room, she realized that her life had taken a turn she never could have anticipated. She had no idea where this path would lead, but one thing was clear. She was no longer just a bystander. She was in the middle of a storm, and she would have to learn how to navigate it. Whether she was ready or not, the fight had begun. The room was cold, the silence between Dominic and Jasmine thick as they walked through the corridors of the Castellano mansion. Jasmine could feel the weight of the situation pressing on her shoulders. Every step she took felt heavier, as though the very walls of the mansion were closing in on her. She had never imagined that a simple act of honesty could lead her here, into a world so far removed from the one she had always known. Dominic walked ahead, his back straight, his presence commanding. He was a man who had always exuded power, but now, as they moved through the mansion's opulent hallways, there was a quiet tension in the air that Jasmine couldn't ignore. She had seen this side of him before, the unshakable Mafia boss who ruled with an iron fist. But now, there was something different about him. His jaw was clenched, his brow furrowed in thought, as though the truth she had revealed had shaken him in ways he hadn't anticipated. "You're sure about this?" Jasmine finally broke the silence, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're sure you want me to be involved in all of this?" Dominic didn't immediately answer, his gaze fixed ahead. The mansion was grand, every room a testament to the wealth and power that came with his position. Yet, as they walked deeper into the heart of the estate, Jasmine couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping further into something dangerous. "I didn't ask for your involvement," Dominic said, his voice low and steady. "But you've seen too much. And now that you know what you know, there's no turning back. You're a part of this whether you like it or not." Jasmine's heart pounded in her chest. She had always kept her distance, doing her job and staying out of the way. But now, she was no longer just a maid. She was a witness to a secret that could bring everything crashing down. They arrived at a door at the end of the hallway, and Dominic opened it, motioning for Jasmine to enter. The room was lavishly furnished, a stark contrast to the simplicity of the life she had known before. Dominic stepped inside and turned to face her. "This is where we'll plan our next move," he said, his tone firm, but his eyes lingering on her with an intensity that made her uneasy. Jasmine hesitated before entering, feeling the weight of his gaze on her. "I didn't ask for any of this," she said again, her voice slightly more confident this time. "I never wanted to get caught up in your world. I never wanted to be part of this Mafia business." Dominic's eyes softened, but his expression remained unreadable. He crossed the room to a large desk and began to shuffle through papers. "I know you didn't. But now that you're involved, you can't simply walk away. The people who know about this secret won't stop until they've exposed it. And that includes you, Jasmine." Jasmine felt a chill run down her spine. She had never considered what it would mean to know something like this, to be the one who held the key to unraveling an empire. She had never asked for this responsibility, and yet, here she was, standing in the middle of it all. "What do you expect me to do?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and frustration. "What do you want from me?" Dominic turned to face her, his expression now serious. "I want you to stay here with me. I want you to be part of the team that helps keep this secret safe. You'll be protected, and you'll help us keep things under control." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. "You're asking me to work for you? After everything that's happened?" she asked, disbelief coloring her voice. "You're asking me to stay here, in this mansion, in your world?" Dominic's gaze never wavered. "Yes, Jasmine. That's exactly what I'm asking. You're the only one who knows about this secret. You're the only one who can help me protect it. You've seen what happens when people start digging too deep. You don't want to be on the wrong side of that." Jasmine felt a knot form in her stomach. She had never considered the consequences of knowing something so dangerous. But as she looked at Dominic, as she saw the seriousness in his eyes, she realized that there was no easy way out. "What if I refuse?" she asked quietly, though deep down, she already knew the answer. Dominic's expression hardened. "There is no refusing. Not when you're this deep in. You're already a part of this, whether you want to be or not. The question is, will you stand by me, or will you turn your back on everything I've built?" Jasmine's mind raced. She had never been faced with a decision like this before. She was used to staying in the background, to doing her job and staying out of trouble. But now, she was being asked to take a side, to choose whether to protect the secret that could destroy everything. Her thoughts raced as she weighed her options. On the one hand, she could walk away, disappear into the night, and leave all of this behind. But on the other hand, she had seen what Dominic was capable of, and she knew that walking away might not be an option. She took a deep breath and finally spoke. "I'll stay," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "But I need to understand exactly what I'm getting into. What's the next step?" Dominic's gaze softened slightly, as if he had been waiting for her to say those words. He walked toward her, his steps slow but deliberate. "The next step is simple," he said. "We prepare for whatever comes next, and we make sure no one else finds out about what you've uncovered. Are you ready for that?" Jasmine nodded slowly, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision she had just made. She had no idea what the future held, but one thing was clear, there was no turning back now. Dominic's office was eerily quiet as he sat behind his massive desk, reviewing papers with his usual precision. Jasmine stood by the window, her hands folded in front of her, feeling like an outsider in a world she didn't belong to. The view from the window was breathtaking. New York City stretched out before her, its towering buildings casting long shadows in the late afternoon sun. She had never been in a place like this, not in her wildest dreams. The lavish mansion, the expensive furnishings, the power that seemed to radiate from every corner. It was all so far removed from the life she had known. She was just a maid, just someone who cleaned up after people, but now, in this very room, she was involved in something much larger. Dominic had promised her safety, but safety from what? She didn't know, and she didn't know if she was ready to find out. The words from their earlier conversation echoed in her mind. "You're part of this now," Dominic had said. Part of it. What did that even mean? Jasmine had never wanted any of this. She had never asked to be involved in his world of power and deception. She had always kept to herself, stayed in the background, made sure to never draw attention. But now, her involvement was inevitable. She had uncovered something that Dominic had kept hidden for years, and in doing so, had become a player in his dangerous game. Dominic glanced up from his papers, his sharp eyes catching hers. "You're quiet today," he remarked, his voice casual, but there was an edge to it. Jasmine swallowed, pushing her thoughts aside. She hadn't even realized she was deep in thought. "I'm just trying to process everything," she said honestly. "It's a lot to take in." Dominic nodded, his gaze softening for a moment. "I know," he said. "It's not easy, but you've made your choice. You're in this with me now." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat at his words. She had made her choice, hadn't she? She had agreed to stay, to help him protect the secret she had uncovered. But that didn't mean she understood the consequences, not fully. She had no idea what she was really getting into. Dominic stood up from his desk, walking toward her with slow, deliberate steps. He wasn't threatening, but his presence was commanding. He moved with the ease of someone who knew they had control of the situation, someone who had always been in charge. "I know this isn't what you imagined for your life, Jasmine," he said quietly, his voice low. "But this is your reality now. You can't go back to the way things were." Jasmine looked up at him, her chest tightening. She had no answer. How could she go back to her old life, when she was now so deeply entangled in his? "What happens next?" she asked, the question lingering in the air. Dominic's eyes darkened for a moment, his expression shifting as if considering something. Then he spoke, his voice steady. "Next, we get ready. There are people who want to use this secret against me. We have to stay one step ahead, always. And you're going to help me do that." Jasmine felt a wave of uncertainty wash over her. She wasn't sure if she was ready for the responsibility he was placing on her, but she knew she didn't have a choice. "How?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. "How do I help?" Dominic paused, his gaze locking with hers. "By doing exactly what I say," he replied. "By keeping your head down, staying close, and learning what you need to know. I'll protect you, but you have to do your part. Trust me, Jasmine. You'll be safer with me than on your own." His words were reassuring, but they didn't completely ease the fear she felt. She had never been a part of this world, and now she was being asked to dive headfirst into it. She didn't know how to navigate the dangerous waters that surrounded Dominic, but she knew that her life had already changed. And now, she was on a path that she couldn't turn away from. "Okay," she said, nodding slowly. "I'll do what I can." Dominic gave her a small, approving nod, as if pleased with her answer. "Good. That's all I need to hear." He turned back to his desk, picking up a file and opening it. "For now, just stay here, keep quiet, and observe. I'll give you more to do soon. But until then, I need you to understand something." Jasmine tilted her head, waiting for him to continue. "You're not just working for me," he said, his voice low, but firm. "You're part of this family now, and we protect our own." Jasmine's heart thudded in her chest. Part of this family? What did that even mean? She had been a stranger in his world, but now, Dominic was telling her she was family. Could she really believe that? Was she ready to step into that role? She didn't know, but there was one thing she was certain of. Dominic Castellano wasn't the kind of man who made empty promises. Whatever this was, whatever was coming next, Jasmine had a front row seat to it. And there was no going back. The days following Jasmine's agreement to stay were filled with quiet tension. She spent most of her time in the mansion, observing, waiting for Dominic's next instructions, trying to adapt to her new life, one that had turned from simple to complex in the blink of an eye. It wasn't that she hadn't expected things to change. She knew her encounter with Dominic, and the secret she had uncovered, had irrevocably altered her path. But the reality of being drawn into his world, one filled with hidden dangers, complex alliances, and powerful enemies, was far different than she had imagined. Dominic was always around, a constant presence in the mansion. Even when he wasn't physically present, Jasmine could feel his influence everywhere. His security detail watching her, the staff moving cautiously around her as if they too had been swept up in the new arrangement. Dominic's eyes were everywhere, and for the first time, Jasmine wasn't sure if she was being watched out of care or control. She had expected to feel safer with him, but now, as she navigated her days in the mansion, she felt the weight of her choices more than ever. She was here, with him, a part of something she couldn't fully understand. The mansion was magnificent, its grandeur overwhelming at times. High ceilings, grand chandeliers, and priceless artwork adorned the walls. Yet, the splendor couldn't disguise the tension that hung in the air. Every conversation seemed to be about strategy, every move calculated for maximum control. She was far from her humble beginnings, from the small apartment she had shared with her mother. She could still remember the long hours spent cleaning homes just to make ends meet. The days when the most complicated decision she had to make was whether she could afford the bus fare to get to work. But now, in this mansion, surrounded by wealth and power, Jasmine realized she had a new life ahead of her, one she couldn't escape from. And it wasn't just the mansion that had changed. Dominic, too, had changed in her eyes. The man she had first met, the cold Mafia boss, had become someone she was starting to understand, someone she might even begin to care for, in ways she hadn't expected. He was still a mystery to her, but she had seen glimpses of vulnerability beneath his hardened exterior, and that vulnerability made him all the more dangerous. Jasmine didn't know what was happening between them, if anything was even happening at all, but she couldn't ignore the way he had begun to rely on her. There were moments, brief and fleeting, when their conversations were more than just business. When he spoke to her about things that were personal, things that made her realize just how deeply she had been drawn into his world. "You're not just here to help," he had said one evening, his voice softer than usual. "You're part of the plan now, Jasmine. You matter more than you realize." Those words had stuck with her, but she hadn't known what to make of them. What did it mean to matter in this world, in Dominic's world? And was it possible for someone like her to make a difference? Or was she just another pawn in a game too large for her to understand? As the days passed, Jasmine found herself becoming more attuned to the subtle shifts in the mansion. She noticed how the staff, once cordial and professional, now seemed to treat her with a measure of respect. There were no more whispers behind her back, no more side glances. In Dominic's world, she had a place, and that place seemed to be more important than she had realized. But with that importance came pressure. The secret she had uncovered, Dominic's family betrayal, was still a ticking time bomb. She could feel the weight of it every time she looked at him, every time their eyes met. It was a bond between them now, something they shared that no one else in his world knew. It was a bond that made her feel both included and excluded at the same time. On a quiet afternoon, as Jasmine was making her way to the kitchen, she encountered Dominic in the hallway. He was alone, a rare sight, and he looked as though he had been waiting for her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Jasmine wasn't sure what to say, unsure if she should speak first or wait for him to make the first move. Finally, Dominic broke the silence. "You're still unsure about all of this, aren't you?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. Jasmine looked up at him, her breath catching in her throat. She hadn't expected him to address her thoughts so directly. "I'm not sure about a lot of things," she admitted, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside her. "But I do know that I can't go back to my old life. Not now." Dominic nodded, his eyes softening for a moment. "Good," he said, stepping closer. "Because once you're in this world, there's no turning back. And I need to know you're ready for whatever comes next." Jasmine's heart raced. What did he mean by whatever comes next? The uncertainty of her position, the secrets she was carrying, it was all becoming too much. But despite the fear, despite the doubts, she knew one thing. She was already in too deep. She had made her choice, and now, there was no escaping the consequences. "I'll stay," she said finally, her voice steady. "I'm ready." Dominic's gaze held hers for a long moment, as if searching for something in her eyes. Then, without saying another word, he nodded. "Good," he said. "Then let's get to work." The next few days in the mansion were a blur of activity, but for Jasmine, they felt like one long, never-ending stretch of uncertainty. Dominic's words echoed in her mind constantly. You're part of this now. She still wasn't sure what that really meant. She was just the maid, a small part of a much larger picture, yet she could feel herself being drawn deeper into his world with every passing day. Every conversation, every glance, and every quiet instruction from Dominic felt like another thread binding her to this new, dangerous life. It wasn't that she wasn't grateful for the protection he had promised. It was the uncertainty of it all that unsettled her. What would happen to her once the storm hit? Would she be caught in the crossfire, or would she be able to remain untouched? Every day, she learned more about Dominic, but the more she understood, the more she realized how little she truly knew about the world he lived in. One evening, as Jasmine was cleaning the main hall, she saw Dominic standing by the grand staircase, looking out over the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows. His posture was rigid, his gaze distant. He seemed lost in thought, as if the weight of the world was on his shoulders. Jasmine hesitated, unsure whether to disturb him. She had learned not to intrude on his personal moments, but something in his demeanor made her want to ask if he was okay. She took a deep breath and approached him slowly. Is everything all right, Mr. Castellano? She asked, her voice gentle. Dominic turned to her, his expression softening for a moment when he saw her. Everything's fine, he said, his voice low, but there was an underlying tension in it. Just thinking about what's to come. Jasmine nodded, not sure if she should press further. There was so much she didn't understand about Dominic's world, so much she hadn't been told. But she could see the burden he carried, the weight of responsibilities he bore that no one else could fathom. I know I'm not exactly in the position to ask, she began, but I just want to know, what happens now? What's the next step in all of this? Dominic regarded her for a long moment, his gaze intense, as if considering whether he should share his thoughts. Finally, he spoke, his voice softer this time. The next step is simple, he said. We prepare for what's coming. There are people who want to use this secret against me. We need to stay one step ahead of them. And you, Jasmine, you're going to help me do that. Jasmine's stomach tightened at his words. She had been so focused on her own confusion, her own fears, that she hadn't fully grasped the danger surrounding them both. The secret she had uncovered wasn't just a piece of gossip, it was a weapon. And in Dominic's world, weapons were meant to be used. How? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. How can I help? Dominic's eyes softened as he stepped closer, his presence enveloping her. You're not just here to observe, Jasmine, he said, his voice steady. You're here to be part of the solution, to help us stay ahead, to protect what's ours. I trust you. That's why you're here. The words hit her harder than she expected. She had never been part of something this big, this important. And now, she was being asked to help protect an empire she barely understood. I'm not sure what I can do, Jasmine said, her uncertainty creeping back in. I don't know this world, Dominic. I'm just me. Dominic smiled, though it was brief and fleeting. That's why. I need you. You see things differently. You've already proven that. You've uncovered something no one else could. And now, you're in a position to make a real difference. Jasmine felt a rush of emotions, fear, uncertainty, but also something else. A flicker of purpose. For the first time since she had entered this world, she felt like she wasn't just a bystander. She wasn't just cleaning up after powerful men in suits. She was part of something bigger. She was part of Dominic's world. I'll do what I can, she said, her voice steady with a newfound resolve. I won't let you down. Dominic nodded, his gaze sharp. Good. I knew I could count on you. He turned back toward the window, his posture still tense, but there was something different in the way he held himself now, as if a small weight had been lifted. The truth is, Jasmine, I've been preparing for a war. Not the kind you see in movies, but a war that involves power, influence, and secrets. And now, you're part of it. You'll help us win. Jasmine stood there, taking in his words. She had no idea what she was really getting into, but she knew one thing for sure. There was no turning back now. She was in this world, whether she was ready or not. And whatever came next, she would face it head on, with Dominic by her side. The days that followed were filled with a sense of quiet anticipation. Dominic's words still echoed in Jasmine's mind, his promise of protection and his trust in her. It was a heavy weight to carry, one that made her heart race with both excitement and fear. Every corner of the mansion now felt different, more alive, more tense, as if everyone knew that something was about to happen. Jasmine spent her time learning, observing, trying to find her place in a world that had once seemed so far removed from her own. She helped where she could, staying out of the way when necessary, but always keeping her eyes open. Dominic had kept her close, always giving her small tasks to do, always watching her with that piercing gaze that seemed to see through everything. And yet, despite his constant presence, there were moments when she felt more isolated than ever. He had told her she was part of the plan now, but what exactly was that plan? What role did she play in the grand scheme of things? As she sat alone in one of the mansion's many sitting rooms, she couldn't shake the feeling that the answers were just out of reach. She had seen the power Dominic wielded, had witnessed the way his presence could command a room, but she still didn't fully understand the world he moved in. The alliances, the politics, the hidden dangers that lurked in the shadows. All she knew was that she was a part of it now, and that realization both terrified and intrigued her. Jasmine had never been one for power games. She had spent her life keeping her head down, doing her work and staying unnoticed. But now, in this mansion, with Dominic at her side, she couldn't escape the feeling that she was caught up in something far bigger than herself. She had a new purpose now, and it was unclear what that purpose would cost her. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft sound of footsteps approaching the room. She looked up to see Dominic standing in the doorway, his dark eyes fixed on her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. There was something in his gaze, something unspoken, that made her heart race. He had a way of making her feel both important and insignificant at the same time. "You've been quiet," he said, his voice low and smooth. "What's on your mind?" Jasmine hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. She had grown used to keeping her thoughts to herself, but something about Dominic's presence made her want to open up. "I'm just trying to figure things out," she said slowly, her voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling inside her. "I'm still not sure what my role is in all of this. I don't fully understand everything." Dominic stepped into the room, his gaze never leaving her. He closed the door behind him, and the space between them felt smaller, more intimate. "You don't need to understand everything, Jasmine," he said, his voice softer now. "Not right away. What matters is that you're here, and that you're with me. We'll figure the rest out as we go." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. His words were reassuring, but they also made her feel exposed. She wasn't sure how much of herself she should give to him. She wasn't sure if she was ready to fully trust him, to fully embrace this new life he was offering her. But she knew one thing for certain. There was no going back now. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "For everything." Dominic regarded her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. Then, he took a step closer, closing the distance between them. "I know this isn't easy," he said quietly. "But I trust you, Jasmine. I need you to trust me, too. We're in this together. And together, we can make sure no one takes what's ours." His words were both a promise and a warning. Jasmine could feel the weight of them, the responsibility they carried. She had never asked for this, never imagined that her life would change so drastically. But here she was, standing in the middle of it all, caught between fear and resolve. Dominic's gaze softened, and for a moment, she saw a flicker of something in his eyes, a vulnerability she hadn't expected. "You don't have to be afraid," he said, his voice gentle. "I'll protect you, but you have to trust that I'm doing this for the right reasons." Jasmine nodded slowly, the weight of his words settling in her chest. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that he had her best interests at heart. But the truth was, she didn't know him well enough to be certain. She didn't know if she could trust him completely. But she had already made her choice. She had already crossed a line she couldn't uncross. And now, there was no turning back. "Okay," she said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty she felt. "I trust you." Dominic's eyes locked onto hers, and for a brief moment, she felt as if he could see straight through her. But then, he gave a small nod, a silent acknowledgement of her words. "Good," he said quietly. "That's all I need to hear." The tension between them eased slightly, but Jasmine still felt the weight of everything pressing down on her. She had trusted him with something important, something she couldn't take back. And now, she had to live with the consequences of that trust. Dominic turned toward the door, his demeanor shifting back to the commanding presence she had come to expect from him. "We have work to do," he said, his voice once again firm and authoritative. There's no time to waste. Jasmine followed him out of the room, her heart racing with both fear and anticipation. She had no idea what the future held, but she knew one thing. She was in it now, for better or for worse. And there was no turning back. The following days were a blur of tasks and tension, and Jasmine found herself caught in a world that felt increasingly unfamiliar. She had agreed to be part of Dominic's plans, but the reality of her decision was starting to sink in. Every move she made now felt more scrutinized. Every word exchanged with him carried weight. The mansion had become more than just a job for her. It had become the center of her life, a place where she was no longer just an observer, but an active participant. Dominic, with his presence so commanding, seemed to control everything around her. Yet, in the quiet moments when they were alone, Jasmine sensed something else beneath the surface, a depth to him that she hadn't seen before. It was in the way he watched her, his gaze lingering a little too long, as if trying to decipher her thoughts. It was in the moments when he spoke to her about his world, moments where he seemed almost vulnerable. But those moments were fleeting, quickly masked by the cold exterior he wore when dealing with others. Jasmine had come to realize that she was one of the few people he let in, and she wasn't sure whether that was a privilege or a burden. One evening, after a long day of observing, learning, and trying to keep up with the whirlwind of events that seemed to move at breakneck speed, Dominic summoned her to his office. Jasmine walked down the long hallway, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The mansion, with its vast spaces and high ceilings, felt like a maze sometimes, each turn leading her deeper into a world she was still trying to understand. When she reached the office, she paused before knocking, a strange feeling in her gut. What would this meeting be about? Another task? Or would he finally reveal what she was truly meant to do in all of this? She knocked gently, and Dominic's voice called out from inside. Come in. She stepped inside, the door creaking softly behind her. Dominic was sitting at his desk, papers scattered around him, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked up as she entered, and for a brief moment, their eyes locked. There was something in his gaze that made her heart skip a beat, but she quickly pushed the feeling aside. You wanted to see me? She asked, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. Dominic nodded, his expression shifting from one of concentration to something more purposeful. Yes, we need to talk about the next steps, he said, his voice calm, but with an underlying urgency. You've been with me for a while now, and it's time you fully understood what's at stake. Jasmine's heart began to race. She had known this moment was coming, but hearing Dominic's words made it feel all the more real. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was part of something bigger, something dangerous. She took a step forward, her mind whirling with questions. What exactly is at stake? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady on her. Everything, he said simply. The family, the business, the empire we've built. There are people out there who want to destroy me. And they'll stop at nothing to do so. But I won't let them. He paused, his eyes narrowing as if contemplating something. I'm not asking you to fight, Jasmine, but you need to understand the gravity of what we're dealing with. You've seen the danger, and now you're in it, whether you want to be or not. Jasmine swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling deep in her chest. She had known, on some level, that this was more than just about cleaning the mansion, but now it felt all too real. She had become part of Dominic's world, one filled with power, secrets, and enemies. I'm in this now, she said quietly, more to herself than to him. Dominic nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. Yes, you are. And that means you need to be prepared for whatever comes next. Jasmine felt a chill run down her spine. She had no idea what whatever comes next meant, but she was starting to realize that her life would never be the same again. What do you need me to do? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic's expression softened. Slightly. I need you to keep your eyes open, he said. There are things happening around us, people plotting, moving against us. You might not see it now, but you'll start to notice the signs. When that happens, I need you to tell me. You'll be my eyes and ears in places I can't always be. Jasmine's mind raced. She had never been a part of anything like this before, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for the role he was asking her to play. But she had already made her choice. She was already in this world, and there was no turning back. I understand, she said, her voice steady despite the storm of thoughts in her head. Dominic stood up, walking around the desk to stand in front of her. For a moment, they were both silent, their eyes locked. Then, Dominic spoke again, his voice quieter this time. "You're not just a maid, Jasmine," he said, his tone softer than usual. "You're important to me, and I won't let anything happen to you." His words sent a shiver through her. She had never expected to hear those words from him. She hadn't expected to be anyone's priority in a world like his. But somehow, in this moment, it felt like he meant it. "I'll do whatever I can," she said, her voice firm. "I won't let you down." Dominic smiled, a small but genuine smile that made something stir inside her. "I know you won't," he said quietly. "Now, let's make sure we stay one step ahead of everyone who wants to bring us down." Jasmine nodded, a feeling of resolve settling over her. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that she was in this fight with Dominic. And whatever came next, she would face it with him by her side. The weeks that followed were a blur of new routines and growing tension. Jasmine had settled into her role with Dominic's world, but with each passing day, the stakes seemed to grow higher. She had never been one to seek attention, but now she found herself constantly under watch, her every move observed by not only Dominic, but also the people around him. The mansion had become her home, but also a prison, its walls closing in on her as she navigated the intricacies of this dangerous world. She wasn't just working for Dominic anymore. She was part of a larger plan, a plan that was still taking shape and that she wasn't entirely sure she understood. The more she learned, the more she realized that things were not as simple as they seemed. There were layers to this world, secrets within secrets, and Jasmine was slowly being drawn deeper into its web. Dominic had kept his word. He had protected her, kept her out of the line of fire, but with that protection came a constant undercurrent of danger. She had seen it in the way people acted around him. Careful, respectful, and yet always cautious. There were whispers, too, ones that she couldn't quite catch, but she knew they were there. Dominic's power wasn't just in his wealth or influence. It was in the fear he inspired. And that fear, Jasmine realized, was something she would never be able to escape. But there were moments, fleeting moments, when she saw another side to him. The side that wasn't the ruthless Mafia boss, but the man who had made her a part of his life. Those moments were rare, but when they came, they were enough to make Jasmine question everything she had known about him. One evening, as Jasmine was walking down the hallway of the mansion, she found herself face to face with Dominic. His usual calm demeanor was replaced with something else, something that made her heart race. He looked different tonight, less like the powerful boss and more like someone who was struggling with something deep inside. "Jasmine," he said, his voice low, "I need to talk to you." The tone of his voice made her pause. There was something urgent in it, something that pulled her in despite her growing doubts. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. Dominic looked at her for a long moment, his gaze intense. "There's been a change in the situation," he said. "People are getting closer. The enemies I've been trying to protect you from are starting to move." Jasmine felt a chill run through her. She had known this moment would come, but hearing him say it out loud made it feel too real. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear that was beginning to take root in her chest. Dominic took a step closer, his expression hardening. "I need you to be ready," he said. "I need you to stay alert. There are things happening behind the scenes, things I can't control, but you can help me keep track of them. You're more than just a maid, Jasmine. You're part of this now, and I need you to be prepared for what comes next." Jasmine's heart raced. She had no idea what he was asking of her, but she knew one thing. She wasn't just an observer anymore. She was in the thick of it, whether she liked it or not. "I'll do what I can," she said, her voice firm. Dominic nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. "I know you will," he said quietly, "and I won't let anything happen to you. But you need to understand that this is bigger than either of us. This is a war, Jasmine, and it's one I won't lose." His words sent a shiver down her spine. She had never imagined that she would be part of something like this, something so dangerous. But now, as she looked at Dominic, she realized there was no going back. She was in this, and there was no way out. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. Dominic kept her close, giving her small tasks to do, making sure she stayed involved without revealing too much. Jasmine could feel the pressure mounting. Every conversation with him, every look exchanged, seemed to carry more weight than it had before. She wasn't just following orders anymore. She was actively helping him fight the battles that were coming. It wasn't easy. Jasmine still felt like an outsider, unsure of her place in this complex world of power and deception. She had grown used to being in the background, to staying out of sight, but now, it was impossible to ignore what was happening around her. Every time she saw Dominic, she could sense the weight on his shoulders, the responsibility he carried. And every time he spoke to her, his words felt like a promise, one that was both comforting and terrifying at the same time. Jasmine was beginning to understand just how much was at stake. It wasn't just his empire that was on the line. It was her future, too. She had become too involved, too important to be left out of what was coming next. And yet, as much as she wanted to turn away, to escape the pressure and the danger, she knew that she couldn't. She was already too deep. The mansion had become a prison, but it was also her only refuge. Dominic was right. She was in this now. And whatever came next, she would face it with him. Together, they would fight to protect what was theirs. And she would stand by his side, no matter what. The mansion was alive with activity, the air thick with the anticipation of what was to come. Jasmine had never experienced anything like it before. Every room felt like a battleground, each corner holding its own secrets. Dominic had made it clear that there was no room for mistakes, no space for hesitation. She had become part of the plan, but the details of that plan were still unclear to her. Every conversation she had with Dominic left her with more questions than answers, but she didn't have the luxury of time to seek out those answers. She had to trust him, and that trust was beginning to weigh heavily on her. She was in this world now, and there was no going back. The days were filled with brief meetings, quick exchanges, and moments of tension. Dominic kept her close, but not too close, as if giving her just enough information to keep her in the loop, but not enough to truly understand the full scope of what they were dealing with. Jasmine had learned to read between the lines, picking up on the subtle hints that revealed more about Dominic's world than anything he had explicitly told her. She knew there were enemies closing in. She knew that the family secret she had uncovered was a ticking time bomb, and that they were running out of time to contain it. One evening, after another long day of keeping her head down and following Dominic's orders, Jasmine found herself in the mansion's study, a room that had become her refuge in recent days. The bookshelves, lined with thick volumes of history and law, seemed to offer her some sense of stability in the midst of the chaos surrounding her. As she sat there, flipping through the pages of a book she didn't really have the patience to read, she heard the soft click of the door behind her. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. "I thought I'd find you here," Dominic's voice said, smooth as ever. Jasmine didn't look up. She hadn't seen him in hours, but she could feel the weight of his presence the moment he entered the room. "I needed some time to think," she replied, her voice calm, though she could feel her pulse quicken at the sound of his footsteps drawing closer. Dominic stood beside her, but didn't sit. His presence was enough to fill the space, and Jasmine could sense the tension in him, the same tension that had been building between them for weeks now. "What's going on in that mind of yours?" he asked softly, his voice just above a whisper. Jasmine closed the book and set it aside, her hands resting on the desk in front of her. She had been thinking about this moment for days, wondering what she would say when he finally asked. She wasn't sure if she was ready to voice the questions that had been swirling in her head, but she couldn't keep them bottled up any longer. "I'm trying to understand all of this," she said, her voice steady. "I'm trying to understand why I'm here, why you brought me into this. I don't know if I'm ready for this world. I don't know if I'm cut out for it." Dominic was silent for a moment, as if considering her words carefully. Then, he spoke, his tone softer than usual. "You're here because I trust you," he said simply. "And you're in this because you've already proven yourself. You've seen things others haven't. You've done things others wouldn't." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. She had never expected him to say something like that. She had always thought of herself as just another person in the background, just another employee doing her job. But Dominic had made her feel like she mattered, like she was part of something bigger than herself. "But what if I can't do it?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. "What if I'm not strong enough?" Dominic's gaze softened, and for a moment, he seemed almost vulnerable. It was a side of him she hadn't seen before, and it took her by surprise. "You're stronger than you think," he said, his voice firm. "You've already done more than most people would have. You've shown courage, Jasmine. And that's all I need. The rest, we'll figure out together. His words were both a reassurance and a challenge. Jasmine wasn't sure if she believed him, but she knew that she had no choice but to try. She had already made her decision. She had already crossed a line, and there was no turning back now. I'll do my best, she said quietly. That's all I can promise. Dominic nodded, his expression returning to its usual calm. That's all I need, he said. He paused, then added, we've got a lot of work ahead of us, Jasmine. A lot of people are depending on us. Jasmine nodded, her mind racing with everything she had just heard. She wasn't sure what was coming next, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't alone anymore. She had Dominic by her side, and together, they would face whatever came next. And even though she was still uncertain of everything, one thing was clear. She was part of something bigger than herself, and she couldn't turn away now. The mansion had grown quieter in the past few days, but the silence wasn't reassuring. It was the kind of quiet that hinted at something brewing beneath the surface, something that was building to a breaking point. Jasmine had become more accustomed to the rhythm of the mansion, the ebb and flow of its daily activities. Yet each moment she spent here felt like it was drawing her further into a world she wasn't fully prepared for. Every glance from Dominic, every word exchanged, felt heavy with meaning, and she found herself second-guessing every action, every decision she made. She had never been one to attract attention, but now it seemed impossible to avoid. Dominic had said that she was part of the team, part of the plan, but Jasmine was beginning to wonder just how much she truly understood about the plan. She didn't know where she fit into it all, and she couldn't shake the feeling that there were things happening just out of sight, things that Dominic wasn't sharing with her. As the days went by, the uncertainty gnawed at her. But there were also moments, small, fleeting moments, when she felt more than just a maid. She had started to see Dominic in a different light, not just as the intimidating Mafia boss, but as a man who was struggling with something deeper. His usual calm facade occasionally slipped, revealing the burden he carried. Jasmine had caught glimpses of that vulnerability, and it made her question everything she had thought she knew about him. She had heard the rumors, the whispers about Dominic Castellano, the ruthless crime lord who had built his empire on fear and manipulation. But what if there was more to him than that? What if the man who stood before her, the one who had trusted her with his secrets, was capable of more than just the cold, calculated power everyone believed him to possess? One evening, as Jasmine was walking down the hallway, she found herself once again face to face with Dominic. He had been busy all day, his usual air of authority making him seem distant, but now, as their eyes met, she could feel the tension in the air. She had never been good at reading people, but with Dominic, it was different. She could tell when something was weighing on him, when the storm inside him was building. "You're quiet tonight," he said, his voice low. "What's on your mind?" Jasmine hesitated. She wasn't sure if she should answer honestly, but something in his voice made her feel like she could. "I'm just trying to understand everything," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I don't know what role I'm supposed to play in all of this." Dominic's gaze softened slightly, and for a moment, he seemed to relax. He stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "I told you before," he said quietly, his voice surprisingly gentle. "You're here because I trust you. You've proven yourself more than you know." Jasmine looked up at him, her heart pounding. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I'm ready to be part of this world." Dominic's expression remained calm, but there was something in his eyes, something that made Jasmine feel like he understood. "This world isn't easy," he said, his voice steady. "But you've already taken the first step. You're here, and you're with me. That's all that matters." Jasmine didn't know what to say to that. She had never imagined she would be part of this world, a world filled with secrets, power, and fear. But now, standing here with Dominic, she realized she couldn't turn back. She was already too far in. "What happens next?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Dominic paused for a moment, his gaze intense. Then, he spoke, his voice low but firm. "Now, we stay ahead of the game," he said. "We keep moving, keep preparing for whatever comes next. I've trusted you with a lot, Jasmine, but you need to understand the gravity of it all. There are people who would do anything to take me down, and now you're part of this fight." Jasmine swallowed hard, her heart racing. The weight of his words settled heavily on her shoulders. She hadn't fully grasped the dangers that came with being involved in Dominic's world, but she was starting to understand now. She had a role to play, and it wasn't one she could easily back out of. "I understand," she said, her voice steady despite the fear creeping up inside her. "I'll do whatever it takes." Dominic gave a small nod, his expression softening. "I know you will," he said. He stepped back, looking at her with a mixture of admiration and something else, something Jasmine couldn't quite place. "But remember," he continued, his voice becoming more serious, "this isn't just about protecting me. It's about protecting yourself, too. The people we're up against are dangerous, and if we don't stay ahead, we could all fall." Jasmine nodded, the gravity of his words sinking in. She had already made her choice, and now there was no turning back. She was in this, for better or for worse. She was part of Dominic's world, and the only way out was through it. As they stood there, the weight of everything hanging between them, Jasmine realized that this was just the beginning. Whatever came next, she would face it with Dominic by her side. And for the first time, she wasn't sure if she was ready, but she knew one thing for sure: she had no other choice. The days continued to blur into one another, a constant rhythm of subtle movements and whispered conversations. Jasmine had settled into a routine, but it was a routine filled with a tension she couldn't ignore. The mansion, once a place of opulent luxury, now felt like a ticking time bomb. Every corner of it seemed to hide secrets. Every shadow felt like it could hide a threat. She had become a part of Dominic's world, but the question still lingered in her mind. What did that really mean for her? She had trusted him, placed her faith in him, but trust wasn't a shield against the unknown. As the days passed, she couldn't shake the feeling that things were getting more complicated. Dominic had kept his promise to protect her, but with each passing day, she felt like she was becoming more deeply involved in a war she didn't fully understand. It wasn't just about loyalty anymore. It was about survival. Dominic's presence was constant. He was always there, his eyes always watching, his mind always calculating the next move. The weight of his expectations was always present, even in moments of silence. Jasmine had started to notice the subtle signs of the pressure he was under. The way he would pause in the middle of a conversation, as if searching for the right words, or how his hands would briefly clench when he thought no one was looking. It wasn't just the enemies that weighed on him. It was the burden of the empire he had built, and the fear that it could all crumble. Jasmine had seen that fear before, in the rare moments when his guard slipped, when his mask of control faltered. And she had seen it in herself, too. She had always been the quiet observer, the one who kept her head down and stayed out of trouble. But now, in Dominic's world, trouble was everywhere. And she wasn't just an observer anymore. She was part of it. One evening, after a long day spent in the mansion, Dominic called for Jasmine to meet him in his office. The tone of his voice was calm, but there was an underlying urgency to it that made her heart race. She had learned to recognize the subtle shifts in his demeanor, and she knew that something was coming. She arrived at his office, her mind racing with questions. Dominic was standing by the window, looking out over the city, his back to her. The moment he heard her enter, he turned, his expression unreadable. "You're here," he said, his voice soft. "Come in." Jasmine stepped into the room, her heart pounding in her chest. "What's going on?" she asked, trying to steady her voice. Dominic walked toward her, his movements deliberate. "We've reached a critical point," he said, his tone serious. "Things are moving faster than I expected. The people we've been watching are getting closer. And it's time we made our move." Jasmine's stomach tightened. She had known this moment was coming, but hearing it out loud made it feel too real. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the uncertainty gnawing at her. Dominic paused for a moment, his gaze softening as he looked at her. "I need you to trust me," he said, his voice low. "This is bigger than anything we've faced before. But we have to act now, before it's too late. You've been with me through all of this. You know how important it is." Jasmine nodded slowly, her heart racing. She didn't fully understand the magnitude of what Dominic was saying, but she knew that she had already made a choice. She was in this now. "I trust you," she said, her voice firm. Dominic's gaze softened, and for a brief moment, he looked almost relieved. He walked over to his desk and picked up a folder, handing it to her. "This is everything we need," he said, his voice steady. "It's time to put the plan into action, and you're going to help me execute it." Jasmine took the folder, feeling the weight of the responsibility he was placing on her. The contents of the folder were a blur of papers, but she could sense the importance of it all. "What's the plan?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Dominic looked at her, his expression unreadable. "We're going to strike first. We're going to take control before they have a chance to act. And you'll be there with me, every step of the way." Jasmine's mind raced as she absorbed his words. This was it. The moment she had been waiting for. The moment when everything would change. But was she ready for it? She didn't have time to doubt. She had already stepped into this world, and now there was no turning back. "I'm with you," she said, her voice unwavering. Dominic gave a small nod, his gaze intense. "Good. I knew I could count on you." He turned back to the window, his face hardening as he looked out over the city. "It's time to move. We don't have much time." Jasmine stood there for a moment, the weight of what was about to happen sinking in. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing. She was in it with Dominic, and whatever came next, she would face it with him by her side. As she left his office, the weight of the folder in her hands felt heavier than it ever had before. She had made a choice, and now she would see it through, no matter the cost.